Let's kick off. If anyone that's joining now, thank you. Welcome to the webinar. It's one of the series of the boot camp before Christmas to get your business fit for business. Normally we do these, if you've not read the information this, that we do these more of a discussion with experts to have a chat, and Miles and I'll do our best to have a chat to make it interesting for you guys rather than it just be a dictation. But today's slightly different, as I mentioned in the Power Hive WhatsApp, because I think this is an information giver. I think it's got to be one of those things where I'd like, Miles, for people to leave this webinar knowing at least what the subject matter entails, where it sits, and more importantly, as I said in that message, the sobering importance of, if you're not on board with this, then you're soon going to be left out in the cold, both from a legal and government perspective, but also from the clients that you work with. So if we can get that message across as well today, that'd be really great. Miles, let's start immediately then. Let's get some of the easier questions relayed, because when this topic first came up, when I first started talking about this topic many years ago, it was just called diversity. And then it was called diversity and equity. And then it was called, well, let's call it D&I, and it's inclusion. And as you and I have, well, you corrected me a few weeks ago and said, well, it's now DEI and B, Keith. So just tell us a bit about what it is first, so that those that are not 100% familiar with this get that understanding around that.
Okay. No, it's a great place to start, because I think one of the challenges we all have is the fear of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, using the wrong terminology. And you're right, what was once diversity was then diversity and inclusion, and then it's equality. But then the E gets replaced, no longer equality, it's now equity and belonging. And it's the same with LGBT and LGBTQ and QI plus, and then the plus disappears again, and you're like, hang on a minute, what am I doing? And there was a phrase, wasn't there? BAME. Everybody was talking about BAME candidates, and then all of a sudden that got derided and ridiculed. So I think the important thing is, and what I would share, my own humble experience of being in this space actively around DEIB-led talent acquisition for the last 2 years, is don't worry about getting it wrong. Don't fear getting it wrong, saying the wrong thing. I think it's all about, if you're doing this with the right reason and the right motivation, then people won't worry. They'll happily correct you. For those of you that have holidayed in France, and all you ever do is speak English, the French hate you for it. If you try and speak French, no matter how bad you speak your French, they love you for that. And it's the same within this space. So look, DEIB, what's it all about? Well, immediately we think, oh, this is about race, isn't it? Oh, it's about women in business. It's about the color of your skin. And look, the reality is, it's not about the color of your skin. It's not about what's between your legs. It's much broader than that. Getting it all a bit boring and technical, there was this thing called the Equality Act. I think it was 2010, can't remember what month. And it set out 9 protected characteristics, and yes, race is in there, gender's in there, gender recognition's in there, age is in there. There's a number of protected characteristics, but DEIB goes broader than this and goes deeper than this. It's about social mobility, and it's about all the other things where bias can, does, and will exist. And a few of you who may follow me on LinkedIn may have seen some posts about disfigurement this week. I thought it was rather an interesting point that was made, an article I read on Sky News that was talking about the way that Hollywood portrays disfigured people as evil, as ugly, as something to be repulsed and scared of. And actually, there's a lot of people that are disfigured through, procedures, through operations that they've been forced to have, through accidents or whatever it might be. And so bias is a really horrible, ugly thing, isn't it? And it exists in all walks of life, whether it's, BMI, people being sort of looked at as too large or too skinny. There's accent bias that exists as well. We all make judgments based on how we sound, not just how we look. So for me, this is a really broad piece, and it's all about discrimination. It's all about bias. That's the key thing, and that's what we need to get. It's the broadness and the depth of this that we need to get our heads around.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I can jump in on that, Miles, because I think what always puzzled me, and I'm not trying to pretend for a second that I am correct in every single manner of the possible biases that there may be. But what always puzzled me is that some of them got adopted much sooner.
Yeah.
It's like, it seems like you shouldn't be biased to women. Well, that was almost like overnight, as far as I was concerned in recruitment. We had almost a 50-50 setup of male-female.
Yeah.
Then there was no colour prejudice. But then there were other ones where you were going, well, how many people with the disability do you have there? Or how many people of any of those other things do you have there? Ageism was always a big thing in recruitment, which was not something to be proud of. So while some things were almost like, yes, we get it, we shouldn't be doing that, and it's probably beneficial to do these things, others just didn't seem to get it. So one of the questions I wanted to raise, but based on understanding it, then was, well, why is this so important then that people get up to speed now? Let's explain that to the people if we can.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's lots of studies out there by organisations with much smarter people than me working in them, and there's no doubting now that there's not just tenuous links, but there's genuine evidence that organisations that are properly diverse do outperform organisations that aren't. It's as simple as that. And whether that's McKinsey's, Harvard Business School, et cetera, there's loads of studies. I think when we start talking about being able to evidence financial performance of organisations being higher who are diverse against those that aren't, I think there is some tenuous stuff there, and I think it's going to take a little bit more time for it to play out. But why is it important for organisations? For me, there's two big drivers behind this. One, we can't, as organisations, and it's about ourselves as recruitment businesses, but also about the clients that we serve as well.
Yes.
The reality is you can't do what you need to do without good people.
Yes.
And you need to attract good people. And the reality is, and look, I can say this as somebody who's the wrong side of 50, fairly obviously with my glasses and grey hair, but the reality is that the millennials, the Gen Zs, this is important. This is critical for them. Organizations having a social conscience, having a real purpose, understanding the communities that they serve and being part of that broader society. So if you can't demonstrate that you're in this space, you're going to struggle to attract those people. And if you're going to struggle to attract those people, then where's that next layer of your organization coming from? And there is a bit of a downward spiral in there. But, the evidence is there. It's around innovation. It's around problem solving. We've talked about the whole talent piece. Sustainability as an organization, that's important. But one of the key factors that came out of some fairly recent surveys is the way that organizations that have diversity within their ranks actually tend to attract and have more sticky customers, because the reality is we're serving a global community and a broad church, and therefore if we're made up of people just like me, chances are that will not attract other people to our organizations, whether those are clients, whether those are candidates, or whether those are future employees. So we got to break the mold. And coming back to what you said earlier, Keith, about we did some things fairly quickly and fairly easily. Why?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it's bloody easy, isn't it? Because you can look at the color of somebody's skin and you can pretty much tell. And it's not these days, again, this is where we come unstuck and get twitchy and nervous. It's not just about men and women, is it? Because there's a middle ground today as well, and there's fluidity in that middle ground as well. But those things are relatively easy to identify. Identifying neurodiversity is challenging and it's very complex. Identifying disability is challenging as well. The obvious one is the person in a wheelchair, the person that's only got one leg. And I'm not being flippant. I'm just trying to make it really simple.
Absolutely.
But disability comes in many, many guises and many, many forms, and you may not be aware of people within your organization already where diversity exists. So I think one of the things as an organization we need to start doing is thinking about, okay, where are we right now? And that's always the best place to start, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
If we don't have data, if we don't have that demographic snapshot of our organization, well, one of the first things we should be doing is getting that and encouraging people to share in an appropriate way diversity, so we as an organization can understand where we are. That's our starting point, and what does that look like compared to where we want to be,
Yeah, absolutely. And we had a Hive event some weeks ago, and I think one of the biggest, I guess most did you know facts that came up that I wasn't aware of at the time was one around government regulation, was one around the alignment of your clients with your own DNA, if you like, or your own model.
Yeah.
And I guess for those in the audience that perhaps not fully aware of those two things, can we touch on those? Because the government one, I'm going to leave you 100% to, if you don't mind. But I've got my own opinions on with if you're aligned with your customers, you'll get a better retained business off that. But could you just touch on the government side of this and why there is actually a very real need people to address this as soon as they can, because of the position that they'll find themselves in very soon if they don't?
Well, I think from a government perspective, from a legislative perspective, there is now significant pressure, rightful pressure, coming down in the form of legislation, and also in some instances in the form of not compulsory charters or guidelines, but organizations are being encouraged to follow a route to get more diversity within them. And therefore, although it's not been mandated as heavily as I think it should be, the reality is pressures are being put on by central government into the supply chains, into the suppliers, and that's coming down that chain, and we as recruitment organizations are a key element of that supply chain. So, the reality is, and I've seen this firsthand already, where if there's an organization I work with at the moment that does this whole thing very, very well, and they were asked fairly recently by a very well-respected organization to be able to demonstrate that they actually had fairness built within their talent acquisition process. Because if we're going to use you to do recruiting for us, we need you to be able to demonstrate the processes you've got are inclusive, are fair, people aren't going to be discriminated against, that there isn't any overt bias, and where bias might be unconscious, you're doing your best to mitigate it. Unfortunately, that organisation were able to actually demonstrate clearly what they were doing and how they were doing it to meet those needs. And this all might sound like, oh, well, that's not going to affect me, is it? And that's something we don't need to worry about. And the reality is, it is, because what always happens is what goes on at the top of the food chain, and it all starts with central government, it all starts with big enterprise organizations. It filters down, and there's an old adage, isn't there, in business, when America sneezes, we catch a cold. And you look at what's going on over there at the moment and how far they are compared to where we are. It's coming, and it's coming fast. And the danger is, look, if you want to, if you think this is all bullshit, and you think this is all just like messing about, playing games, giving lip service, tokenism, the reality is, if you want your business to survive, actually, if you want your business to thrive, then you've got to get on board with this. Whether you agree with it or not, like it or not, it's not going to be a choice.
Well, we will come on to, if you don't mind, a few, as I say, more the devil's advocate questions, because I just want people that are thinking in that, either negatively because they're negative about it, or negatively because they don't understand it. I want to kind of get some of those grassroots questions out of the way. We'll come back to those if I may.
Okay.
But I will touch on that. I think you're right. I think that what people need to probably grasp is the legislative need for you to have your business like this is going to become a reality sooner than you think. And like with all of these things that we've learned through recruitment, and whether it existed or didn't exist with IR35, for example, in contract businesses, you at least had to understand it. And those that were in the most turmoil was when it says it's happening right now and they weren't ready. Well, wouldn't it be more prudent and practical to get ready for those kind of things now, so that you're well positioned and mature when those things come legislative? I think there's that one to consider. But I'd also say that the alignment thing, again, it might sound obvious, but I have witnessed big companies who, when we've tried to approach them in the past to recruit for them, they've said, "I'm really sorry, you're just not aligned with what our model is."
Yeah.
And it includes this as one of the big foregrounds of that topic. And if you don't have an inclusive environment, well, that's all we have. So, I won't name the names. I don't think it's fair, and their policies may have changed anyway. But one particular company was awkward to the point of, we've now got, of our 1,000 staff, 501 men. We can't hire another man until we now have a woman. So I guess you can take it to the nth degree, but that gives you an idea of the philosophy, of the psychology behind how these companies are actually looking at it. And I think that people should perhaps be aware of.
It is, and I think there are identifiers out there, and we can see this coming. The semi-enlightened in the room might have seen, things like Benefits Corporation, or B Corp as it's better known. That's all about ESG. It's all about social conscience.
Yes.
Might be aware of organisations aligning themselves to the UN Global Goals of Sustainable Development.
Yes.
We're moving very, very rapidly beyond policies, beyond charters. This isn't about just a bit of tokenism. Wrapping our logo in a rainbow flag
tick box
once a year. That's okay, isn't it? Putting a bit of text at the end of every job saying we actively encourage people with, we've gone well beyond that. But bizarrely enough, you still see organisations doing that, and some organisations haven't even reached that point yet. And I think the challenge we've got is, individually and at a business level, we're all at different stages of our journey, and we're not all going to be exemplars. We're all not going to be best in class. Why? Because the leaders of those organizations maybe aren't on board in that way. But the reality is whether you are doing this because you have an absolute passion and desire to be an exemplar, because that's what you believe and that's what you think is right and just at a social level, well, that's brilliant, and I love that. But even if you're doing it from a slightly more skeptical position, but actually, let's seize the moment, seize the opportunity by doing this well, putting this into practice, your organization will benefit as a result of, taking a lead in this.
Well, let's give some tips on that if we can, or some advice on that, because I think it would be good for some people to learn what best practice does look like from a D, E and I and B approach, or led approach as such. So perhaps if you could, one, obviously share why that's so obvious, but if you've got perhaps a case study without obviously naming names or an example, that would probably be useful, I think, Miles.
Yeah, no, I will do, and stop me if I start to go on too much about.
No, it's all right.
But there's a lot here to sort of talk about. What you need to do is you need to put your existing recruitment process head, take it off, put it over there somewhere else, and clear your mind, because to do this to a high degree, an exemplar level, it is about having a radically different mindset and approach to the way you're going to recruit. So what do I mean by that? Well, look, talking about case studies, an organisation I'm working with who's based in Sheffield, and they started their journey just over 2 years ago, started trading just over 18 months ago, and have had real success. But they started off by doing this radical sort of shift. So let's just talk about attraction for a start. So part of the work that they do with their clients is looking at their job descriptions, looking at their advertising copy, looking at the candidate packs, the information candidates are going to get. And this isn't just about rewriting them. This is about actually deploying technology that's available in the public domain, available to all of us, some of it free, some of it paid, but taking the hard gender-coded language out of all of that literature, looking at that language, and again, putting it through a piece of technology to declutter it. Why? Because people with neurodiversity struggle with over-complexity, either in the language or in the way that certain things are sort of formatted. They look at where, to make the process accessible as well. So, and when I talk about that, a lot of us nowadays have technology driving application processes, but can people with different degrees of visual impairment engage with it in an appropriate way? Do you
Right.
actually offer a non-technical route for people who might really struggle with technology? Are you offering the ability to for people to view things in their language of choice? You know, because there's simple technology out there that can flip.
Yeah.
You know, English into French, into Spanish, into German, into Urdu, into Arabic, or whatever. You know, so if we've got people who speak, you know, Pakistani as their first language, why aren't we presenting everything to them in that language? Because that will make it easier for them to apply. It will make them more comfortable. So right at the start of the process, you've got to be thinking about that level of inclusivity. You know, right the way through.
Can I just let me just jump in with that, because I think I think that's something worth dwelling on a little bit, because what I don't think anyone is trying to suggest is that therefore, if there is 100 potential discrimination biases at the moment, that therefore you must have one of each, right? No one's saying that. No. But aren't we also trying to advocate, wouldn't it be a bloody good idea that you at least did have one and maybe two or three of each of that possibles? Because whether you like it or not, there'll almost be a positive discrimination out there that you've got to also embrace as well. Yes. So you're right. You know, if someone speaks a different language, why not switch to that language in the conversation? Because that might actually engage with them better. But to be sinister about it and be more cynical, if you like, because what we're trying to suggest here is you get a better workforce so that you've got a better opportunity to fundamentally have a better revenue stream. So I don't understand why that wouldn't be embraced anyway.
Absolutely, Keith. I mean, I cut my teeth back in the 1990s in IT contract recruitment, you know, and I'm not saying gone are the days, but, you know, quite often there was over bias and racism going on, hiring managers saying they didn't want anybody, you know, of a certain colour. I had candidates that were changing their forenames and surnames to make it more likely that they'd get a phone call, you know, and we had
those in consultants, Miles. We had people with quite difficult to pronounce from an English perspective African names in the company we worked in that would just change their names to English presentable names for simplicity.
Which is quite sort of, it's disappointing that when you reflect and you think, my God, I understand why that happened, but there shouldn't have been a need for it, you know. And again, there's lots of good studies out there that have looked at, you know, the levels of interviews that candidates get called for if they have overt Western identity, whether that be through a photographic image, whether that, you know, in terms of their dress code, whether that be their name. So on and so forth, you know. So that's been well documented. But
in the last event, we had a person stand up, and she goes almost undercover, she says, into companies, and part of her role, she sees, she's tried to oust these people. So one of the things she did, she just went, here's a profile, exactly the sex, and one was Jane Smith, one was Fatima Ahmed, and she sent them both off. And to see what the reaction would be to a number of companies. And then when the Jane Smiths were getting interview requests and the Fatimas weren't, she took them to task on those things. Now, look, I don't want us to get into a draconian, you know, 1984 Orwellian tirade of, look, you didn't do this. But I guess there will become, through the legislative process, as there is with ageism now, you will get to a point where if you're not doing this as a your own business, recruiting in the right manner, then you're probably going to get caught out on this as well for the right reasons.
I think so. So, you know, just coming back to what we were saying, so the whole attraction piece is really important. Why? Because we need to attract. If you can't attract people in at the top of that funnel, whether it's for your own business or for the businesses of your clients, then you're gonna get the same outputs time and time again. And this is why you need to change. You know, one of the key things at the moment is talking about things like employee value proposition and inclusive benefits. You know, so if as an organization, you or your clients have good things in place, make sure we're really overt about them. You know, that's about, you know, shared parental leave, maternity, paternity leave, hybrid working, flexible working, childcare sort of provision, all sorts of things that you can look at having, or maybe have already, but don't necessarily major on. But making those things overt flags to people that you're an inclusive culture environment. You're an inclusive employer. You know,
Yeah.
making sure that you advertise, you know, roles with clear pay, either specific or banded. Why?
Yeah.
Because if you don't, people are thinking, why are they trying to hide that? Is there a
Yes.
problem around gender pay parity or gender
Yeah.
pay gap?
Yes.
You know, so these are just simple things, but we're still right at the top of the funnel around attraction here. One of the most important things that we've learned as part of this journey with this client I'm working with at the moment is about the outreach. You know,
Right.
so do they post things on LinkedIn? Yeah, they do. Do they post things on you know, all the usual job boards and Indeed?
Yes.
Yeah, they do. But what they've also done is they actually go much broader than that. They do direct targeted outreach to where people hang out. So they've got relationships now with disability-led business organizations and charities, female-only communities within business, and so on and so forth. And they're purposely developing those every single week.
Great.
Why? Because a lot of people have given up applying for roles in certain spaces now because they never get an interview, they never get asked. They always get rejected. The technology always says no. So, you know, by doing that targeted outreach, by bringing people in to the process, you need to fill that talent funnel with diverse applicants, whether it's for yourself or for others. That's where the journey starts. But one of the most critical things you've got to start doing now as an organization for you or for your clients is you've got to start collecting that data. Because the trouble is, if you don't start asking for that information, you've got to handle it in an appropriate way, and the HR professionals in the room will know how to do that. And if you're not sure, seek out professional advice. You know, because you've got to hold that data in a way that doesn't actually potentially come into play from a biased perspective against candidates or potential employees. But collect that data and be aware of that data through the talent funnel. You know, it's something that we've seen with this organization, clients absolutely engaging in, for them to be able to see of the 300 applicants what that diversity mix looked like from a protected characteristics point of view, right through down to shortlist. You know, they absolutely buy into that. It's a huge bonus for them to be able to see that what you're doing is having an impact. But importantly, and I'm going to say this as a white middle class man, if somebody like me ends up getting the job based on merit, they can actually, and if they're challenged, they can demonstrate they've got a fair and inclusive and robust process. Because I think more and more now organizations are getting challenged by people saying, hang on a minute, I feel that I have been discriminated against. And this isn't about people just being awkward and saying that, but genuinely saying, why didn't I get an interview? Actually, I feel like I am as good, if not better, than that person. And this will come from internal candidates as well as external as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, so that whole piece is critical.
And also, Miles, like you said before, and again, I'm just putting my cynical hat on for a second for the sake of the argument. Why would you open it to a wider pool anyway? Why wouldn't you just you're cutting your nose off to spite your face, it seems. And, you know, without being belittling of the skill levels within the recruitment industry, a big part of it still remains a numbers game. Well, why wouldn't you make that number a larger number then?
Well, where there's talent shortages and talent gaps, absolutely. But the problem is, Keith, it takes time and it costs a bit more money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, I use a phrase very often, and I can say this because I was one and I still count myself as one, you know, lazy recruiter syndrome. You know, just keep doing what we're doing, but just do more of it. And we'll get there eventually, won't we? But the reality is let's go and find the over 50s. Let's go and find you know, the people from Southeast Asia. Let's go and find the people from Africa. Let's go and find the people in wheelchairs. Let's go and find the people with neurodiversity. Let's get into those communities and say to these people, come in, get involved. We're an inclusive employer, or we're an inclusive recruiter working on behalf of these amazing clients. Be part of it, because I tell you what, there's people sat around who are amazing and are just not being engaged in the right way.
Well, let's stick with that for a second. Let's talk about the big wins and the impact that this can have. I know one of the messages you put out earlier in the Power Hive WhatsApp channel was around a particular one piece of work that was DEI-led approach that led to a certain revenue retained business. Perhaps share that, Miles, if you wouldn't mind.
I will. I mean, the reality is, you know, again, there's degrees here. So going from a normal standard, you know, recruitment process that we do today up to this high-level DEI-led talent acquisition. It's not a case of you've got one option there and you've got one option there. You've got degrees of this in the middle.
Yes.
But what I really love about this approach that we've taken with this business we're working with at the moment is everything they do, all the fees are, to use recruitment language, retained.
Okay.
So clients are paying for what they perceive as an outsourced talent acquisition service.
Okay.
They're not perceiving this business now as a recruitment agency.
Okay.
You know, and I think that's been a massive shift for this organization.
Yeah.
So they're going to clients and they're talking about talent. They're talking about diversity within talent acquisition. They're going with a genuine consultative approach into those organizations and talking about, what are your processes? What are your procedures? Are you doing one-to-one interviewing, which is a huge no-no from a bias perspective?
Yeah.
Are you doing structured, you know, interviewing using diverse panels? Have you got proper representation on that? You know, they're doing having a lot of those conversations, and immediately clients are thinking, I found somebody here that's actually, you know, doing some really good work. So actually, you know, and I know as recruiters, we seek the holy grail of recurring revenue, retained revenue, things like that. So that's been a huge win. I think the other things that this organization that I've been working with now for 18 months has seen, phenomenal advocacy from candidates. So, you know, when I talk about this, you know, genuinely, you know, we all know one person gets that one role. You know, there was a role that they recruited recently for a client, had over nearly 1,000 applicants. Okay.
What? 1,000?
Yeah, nuts, isn't it? But it was a really great organization that people were attracted to. So
that's
over 1,000 applicants, you know, and it was a role within technology, within this brilliant brand organization. They had over 500 people go through their end-to-end process. Okay. Of that 500 people that went through that end-to-end process, because everybody gets feedback, at that point, they're all asked to actually give us your opinion of our processes. 88% of those candidates said that they felt the process was fair, that they felt well treated, and that they would basically come back and re-engage with that process and the client in the future. So nearly 90% candidate advocacy for a recruiter. That's pretty unusual in my book.
Which can then be remarketed as, look what our feedback response is from almost like a net, I don't know, like a score system.
Well, it is. It is. It's that net promoter. But we're the custodians of our clients' brands as recruiters. So you handle those brands with care. You handle the candidates with care. You give the candidates a great user experience and journey, and that has a big knock on. The other really interesting thing to note out of this case study we're talking about now is they've seen almost all of their clients come back and say, well, we want to carry on working with you, and here's some more work. They're not then, and what I would also say is, and I didn't put it in the feed, by the way, is a third of their clients have found them through word of mouth, through hang on, here's this organization doing what we need to be part of this. So they've had a third of their revenue come from clients who they never even went to sell to in the first place. They never even picked up the phone. The client picked up the phone to them because they've realized that somebody's doing something here that they need to be part of, because they have a problem as an organization, around diversity. You
would hope to some of the cynics that looking at this as just another tick list we have to get through, they can just use that. Even if you're cynical, then look at how you can make more money out of it.
I mean, they've had clients, Keith, turn around and said, one instance I specifically remember where they've said that person that's just got the job, who, by the way, is an outstanding candidate, by the way, and also got that job and got promoted within the first 12 months and is now running that marketing department for that client. But they said if we'd had her CV, we'd have rejected it. Why? Because she didn't live in the UK permanently. She was a French national citizen, and so we would have just put that on the reject part straight away. That was it. So you said, and immediately they're like, we've missed the trick here, where we've had all these applicants and we're just quickly sifting by having a process that, and this again, just going back to process, having a process that doesn't rely on a CV, doesn't rely on a letter of application, that gets candidates to answer questions based on skills, abilities, and competence to do the role they're going to be asked to do. By scoring those, by multiple people scoring those, by ranking those, using full anonymization. This is how that organization works.
Right.
People come through the process who would never have got anywhere near the process, you know,
Right.
and towards the end of the process rather. And clients are just sort of all saying, wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've missed something here, and we need to start changing everything we do now as an organization. They've even had clients change their processes now, where they're doing direct hiring themselves and not using agencies. They've actually changed their processes to come in line with what this recruiter is doing with them.
Now that's obviously talking more systems and processes, and we touched on it earlier, technology. Can you share, well, what we'll do, Miles, when we share this video is we'll share quite a lot of information, because I know you've got a reams of stats that I think people should be aware of, which you won't have time to go into today.
Yeah.
You've got much more information about like that EVP proposition. Perhaps people would like to see those kind of information pieces as well. But just quickly, I'm a big fan of technology to help you. You mentioned there are some SaaS, software as a service tools that people can perhaps look at, and perhaps we'll share them as well. But could you perhaps highlight a couple of those now?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the sort of attraction piece, you know, we talked about sort of language and things like that. So there's things called Get Optimal. So getoptimal.com is one. Ad Builder is another one. There's a platform called Tal Vista that again allows you to sort of look at language, to decode language. But look, others are available, others are out there. The one I talked about, neurodiversity, is called Hemingway app. And what that does is that declutters and restructures narrative in a way to make it more appealing to people who have different degrees and complexities around neurodiversity. You know, excuse me, those things are important. A piece of technology that I love called Recite Me, which isn't just about changing text on a website, making it bigger, smaller, different colors for people who've got color blindness, etc., but will actually convert text into audio. So for people who struggle reading too much, I'm one of those people. I've probably read about 3 books in my entire life.
Me too.
you know, I would much rather listen to something. So it's it gives that ability. And there's also, I mean, interestingly, for anybody who uses Microsoft, hand up in the room, probably everybody, within Microsoft Suite, there's this accessibility checker. So if you just go into a Word document and on your top menu bar on the home, there's an accessibility checker, and it will actually go through and it will actually give you hints and tips on how to make your narrative, your slides or whatever more accessible to people. So there's just a few there, but what we can do, Keith, is obviously share an awful lot more of this with some hyperlinks as well.
I think so.
People are sort of struggling to find this stuff.
Yeah, I think so. And look, as I've said in the event, well, I'll go back some years now, actually. First of all, when we in the COVID years, we were doing these much more often, and I was very lucky to have a particular great Zoom session with 5 different people, a person of color, a female, an Olympic athlete with a physical challenge, and a neurodiverse person, and also neurodiversity recruitment agency. And it's like that. I think then what we were trying to do then was make sure that this was always a topic that was coming up more and more often. So I think what would perhaps be useful, Miles, is one, we'll share this video and we'll put out the separate clips of this video as well. We'll share the information that backs up those information pieces behind those clips. But then I think what we ought to do as well is come back to certain topics of this and maybe have much more explanations around certain parts of it, because there's so much. And I don't like using the word rabbit hole, but when you open the door of this is a much bigger challenge that people need to get hold of right now. And I think it'd be wise of them to actually have as much information to hand so they can start acting upon that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Keith. And, you know, just the very small area I touched on when I talked about anonymization and things like that. Look, you can go to the extreme and literally remove the CV and letter of application and all identity from the process right up to the final part where the client actually interviews. But you can be selective about that. You know, you don't have to go to that extreme. So, you know, there is so much available out there, but it's about what's right for you as an organization and what's right for your clients, and making sure that there's something there that you can offer that will be beneficial for them. And this comes back to, again, being consultative.
Yes.
We need to start having conversations with our clients about, what their challenges are around diversity, what their challenges are around social impact and things like that. Because the thing is, unless we start having these types of conversations, how are we going to, there's no point in just waving a big rainbow flag and saying, hey, we're really diverse and look at our diverse process, if that's of no interest to your client, if they've got that boxed off or they just don't bloody well care, which is tragic, but some organizations still aren't in the right space yet, headspace, but they'll be all gone bust probably within the next 10 years if that's the case anyway. But let's start having these conversations with clients and genuinely, one of the big challenges we have as recruitment organizations is being different. Now, I don't believe you can be unique in any way these days, and if you are, it lasts about 5 seconds, because as soon as it's out there, people copy you anyway. And I've seen this with this organization where direct competitors, you look at their websites now and it's like, crikey, they've actually just taken our text and cut and pasted it and put it on their website. It's nuts. But you will be in that top 5%. If you do this stuff now, if you're an early adopter, because the recruitment industry's been slow to get down this route, you're an early adopter, you're in that top 5%, 10%, you're different, you're doing something that is slightly almost unique. And therefore, organizations will sit up, will listen, will have a meaningful and proper conversation. Because if you can help solve this problem for them, and most organizations I speak with have quite an issue in terms of attracting and retaining diverse, staff at all levels of their organization, moving beyond that tokenism of let's have a black person on the board and let's have an intern scheme for black and disabled people. And let's actually get proper diversity within leadership. Most organizations have a real challenge, and if you can provide and be part of the solution for them, they will genuinely put their arms around you. I've seen that firsthand.
I do agree. Miles, I'm conscious of everyone's time, not least of all yours. Those that don't know you, it's Miles Lloyd of North Star People, and what we'll do on the edit, we'll make sure that everyone gets all the information to contact you on this stuff, Miles. As I say, I am such a passionate advocate of the importance of this. I could sit here for another couple of hours. We don't have the time. But Miles, thank you very much for today.
Thank you for having me, Keith.
No problem at all. As I say to everyone that's listening, we'll make sure you get a copy of this. And as I say, we'll promote in those separate issues at another time. But Miles Lloyd, thanks very much today.
Right. Have a good day.
See you later. Bye for now.